3 weeks had passed since the sanctuary arrived at Kepler 442b. The work had been hard but successful. Dr. Lisa Carter and her medical team had developed a cure for the disease that was killing the Zephyrians. They had saved over 50,000 lives. The colony was recovering and people were returning to work. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the medical bay watching Dr. Carter pack the last of the medical supplies. Her team had worked 18 hours a day for 3 weeks straight. They looked tired but happy. The mission had been a complete success. "How many did we save, Doc?" Jake asked. Lisa looked up from the supply crate she was closing. "All of them, Captain. Every single Zephyrian who was still alive when we got here is going to live. We also gave them enough medicine and knowledge to prevent this from happening again." Ben Rodriguez walked into the medical bay. The chief engineer had spent the last 3 weeks rebuilding the colony's power systems. His hands were dirty and his uniform was stained, but he was smiling. "Their generators are running at 100% efficiency now," Ben reported. "Better than they were before the crisis. I also taught their engineers how to maintain the systems properly. They won't have power problems again." Jake felt proud of his crew. This was why the sanctuary existed. They had come to a world where people were dying, and now those people would live. The Zephyrians had been suspicious at first, but by the end they were calling the humans Sky Angels and Life-Bringers. Amy Johnson's voice came over the ship's communication system. "Captain Morrison to the bridge, please. We have incoming ships." Jake's good mood disappeared. Incoming ships usually meant trouble. The sanctuary was not armed and could not defend itself if someone wanted to attack. Jake hoped these were just Zephyrian supply ships or maybe other rescue vessels. He walked quickly to the bridge. Amy was sitting at her communication station looking worried. Commander Sandra Webb was at the sensor station studying her displays. Both women looked tense. "Report," Jake said as he sat in his captain's chair. Sandra turned to face him. 5 ships just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. "They're big, Captain. Much bigger than us, and they're heavily armed." "Can you identify them?" "Working on it now." Sandra's fingers moved quickly over her controls. "Getting a match. Captain, those are Krillian Empire warships." Jake felt his stomach drop. The Krillians were the ancient enemies of the Zephyrians. The two species had been fighting wars for over 1,000 years. If Krillian warships were here, it meant trouble for everyone. "Amy, are they trying to communicate with us?" Amy shook her head. "No, sir. But I'm picking up their internal communications. They're speaking Krillian battle language. Should I translate?" "Do it." Amy worked at her station for a minute, then looked up with fear in her eyes. "Captain, they're talking about destroying the human interference and finishing their cleansing operation on the Zephyrian colony." Jake understood immediately. The Krillians had not come to fight a battle. They had come to wipe out the entire Zephyrian colony. The disease that nearly killed 50,000 people had not been natural. The Krillians had caused it somehow, probably as a biological weapon. Now they were here to finish the job. "How long until they reach us?" Sandra checked her sensors. "At their current speed, 2 hours." Jake stood up and began pacing. The sanctuary could run, but not fast enough, to escape Krillian warships. They could try to hide, but the Krillians would find them easily. The only choice was to try to talk their way out of this situation. "Amy, open a communication channel to the Krillian ships." "Channel open, Captain." Jake took a deep breath and spoke clearly. "Krillian vessels, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Medical Ship Sanctuary. We are a humanitarian rescue vessel operating under galactic medical protocols. We are not armed and pose no threat to anyone. We are preparing to leave this system." The response came quickly. The voice was deep and harsh, speaking in heavily accented English. "Human vessel, you have interfered with Krillian Empire operations. You will surrender all medical data and biological samples immediately." Jake looked at Dr. Carter, who had just arrived on the bridge. She shook her head firmly. The medical data they had gathered could be used to create biological weapons. She would never let that happen. "Krillian vessels, we are a medical ship. Our mission is to save lives, not to interfere in political conflicts. We have no interest in your dispute with the Zephyrians. We simply responded to a distress call. The Krillian voice became angry. You have no authority in this system. The Zephyrians are enemies of the Empire. By helping them, you have made yourselves enemies as well. Surrender the medical data or be destroyed. Dr. Carter stepped forward. Captain, they want the cure so they can create a stronger version of the disease. If we give it to them, they'll kill every Zephyrian in the galaxy. Jake nodded. He had already made his decision. Krillian vessels, we will not surrender medical data that could be used to harm innocent people. We are withdrawing from this system immediately. We do not wish to fight. Then you will die, the Krillian voice replied. Jake turned to Lieutenant Peter Stone at the navigation station. Plot a course out of the system, maximum speed. Course plotted, Captain. Engage. The sanctuary began moving away from Kepler 442b, but Jake knew they were not fast enough. The Krillian warships were already changing course to intercept them. In 30 minutes, they would be in weapons range. Amy was monitoring Krillian communications. Captain, they're talking to their home fleet. They're calling for reinforcements. And they're laughing about destroying a human medical ship. The bridge became quiet. Everyone knew what was about to happen. The sanctuary carried 200 people who had dedicated their lives to helping others. Now they were going to die because they refused to help create a weapon of mass destruction. Dr. Carter sat down in an empty chair. Captain, I need to say something. Every person on this ship volunteered to save lives. We knew the risks. If we die today, at least we die knowing we saved 50,000 innocent people. Ben Rodriguez nodded. And we didn't help monsters create weapons to kill more innocent people. Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. They were scared, but they were also determined. Not one person suggested they should surrender the medical data to save themselves. Amy, send a message to Earth Fleet Command. Tell them what happened. Here. Make sure they know the Krillians are using biological weapons against civilian populations. Amy's fingers moved over her controls. Message sent, Captain. The Krillian ships were getting closer. Jake could see them on the main screen now. They were huge vessels painted in dark colors with weapon ports covering their hulls. Each ship could destroy the sanctuary with a single shot. Incoming transmission from the lead Krillian ship, Amy, reported. Put it on speaker. The harsh voice filled the bridge. Human ship, this is War Commander Thexlar of the Krillian Imperial Fleet. You have one final chance to surrender the medical data. If you refuse, we will destroy you and broadcast the destruction throughout the galaxy as a warning to others who would interfere with the Empire. Jake stood up straight. War Commander, this is Captain Morrison. The Sanctuary is a medical vessel operating under the protection of galactic humanitarian law. We carry only doctors, medical supplies, and life-saving equipment. Attacking us would be a war crime recognized by every civilized species in the galaxy. Thexlar laughed. Humans are not civilized. You are primitives who do not understand galactic politics. Your destruction will teach other species not to interfere with the Empire's business. The communication ended. Jake looked at his crew one last time. They had done good work. They had saved lives and refused to help evil people create weapons. If this was how their story ended, at least it was an honorable ending. All hands prepare for impact, Jake announced over the ship's communication system. The Krillian flagship opened fire. The energy beams hit the sanctuary's weak shields and tore through the hull like paper. The medical ship exploded in a ball of fire and metal. 200 good people died in seconds, but their death was not unwitnessed. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Brooks aboard the Earth Patrol vessel Guardian had been monitoring the situation from the edge of the system. His ship's cameras recorded everything: the unprovoked attack on a medical vessel, the murder of unarmed humanitarian workers, the Krillian celebration as they destroyed the sanctuary. Ryan immediately transmitted the recording to Earth Fleet Command with a Priority 1 emergency code. The message would reach Earth in 6 hours, and when it did, the galaxy would learn what happened when someone attacked Earth's healers. Admiral Patricia Walsh was drinking her morning coffee when the emergency alarm started screaming throughout Earth Defense Command. She had been reading reports about grain shipments to the outer colonies. It was boring work, but someone had to make sure the supply lines stayed open. The alarm meant something terrible had happened somewhere in human space. Patricia put down her coffee and walked quickly to the main command center. The room was already full of officers and technicians. Everyone looked worried. General Robert Kane was standing at the main display screen watching a video transmission. His face was white with shock. "What's the situation?" Patricia asked. Robert turned to look at her. "We just received this from Lieutenant Commander Ryan Brooks. He was patrolling the Kepler 442 system. You need to see this." He pressed a button and the video started playing. Patricia watched as the sanctuary was surrounded by Krillian warships. She heard Captain Morrison trying to negotiate. She saw the medical ship trying to escape. Then she watched in horror as the Krillians opened fire and destroyed the unarmed vessel in seconds. 200 people, Robert said quietly. Doctors, nurses, engineers, all dead because they wouldn't help the Krillians make biological weapons. Patricia felt something cold settle in her stomach. She had known Jake Morrison personally. He had been a good man who believed in helping people. Dr. Lisa Carter had saved her own daughter's life 3 years ago, when a colony plague threatened the outer worlds. Now they were both dead, murdered for the crime of saving lives. "Show me that again," she said. They watched the video 3 more times. Each viewing made it worse. The Krillians had not just attacked a military target. They had deliberately destroyed a medical ship that was trying to leave peacefully. They had celebrated the killing of unarmed humanitarian workers. Then they had broadcast their victory to their home fleet like it was something to be proud of. Communications. Officer David Clark walked up to them. "Admiral, we're receiving priority messages from across human space. Colony governors, fleet commanders, civilian leaders, everyone has seen the footage. They're all asking the same question." "What question?" "What are we going to do about it?" Patricia walked to her command chair and sat down. She had been in the military for 30 years. She had fought pirates, hostile aliens, and resource wars, but she had never seen anything like this. The Krillians had crossed a line that should never be crossed. They had attacked people whose only crime was showing mercy to the sick and dying. "Get me President Helen Davis on secure communication," she ordered. Within minutes, the president's face appeared on the main screen. Helen looked tired and angry. She had obviously been awakened by her advisors with news of the attack. "Patricia, I've seen the footage. Tell me we have options." "We have options, Madam President. The question is how far you want us to go." Helen's voice became very quiet. "They killed 200 of our people, doctors and nurses who were saving lives. They murdered them in cold blood and then laughed about it. How far would you recommend we go?" Patricia had been thinking about that question since she first saw the video. "All the way, Madam President, complete military response. No half measures, no political games. They want to see what happens when you kill Earth's healers. I say we show them. Do it. You have unlimited authorization. Use whatever resources you need." The communication ended. Patricia stood up and looked around the command center. Every officer was watching her, waiting for orders. She had just been given permission to wage total war against the Krillian Empire. It was not a responsibility she took lightly. "General Kane, contact Fleet Admiral Kevin Stone. Tell him to mobilize every available ship, military and civilian. I want the largest fleet in human history assembled within 48 hours. Robert nodded and began making calls. Patricia walked to the science section where Dr. Elizabeth Harper was working on experimental weapon systems. Elizabeth was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes. She had been developing new military technologies for 15 years, but most of her projects were considered too dangerous to use. "Elizabeth, I need everything you've been working on. The projects that were deemed too risky, too powerful, too dangerous. I need them all operational within a week." Elizabeth looked up from her computer. "Admiral, some of those weapons could destroy entire star systems. Are you sure you want to use them?" "The Krillians just murdered 200 medical workers. They attacked a rescue ship and celebrated the killing. Yes, I'm sure. Elizabeth nodded slowly. I'll need additional funding and personnel. You have both. Whatever you need. No limits. Patricia walked back to the main command area where Communications Officer Clark was monitoring news broadcasts from across human space. The footage of the sanctuary's destruction was being shown on every channel. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Admiral, I'm getting reports from every human colony. Volunteer militias are forming. Civilian cargo ships are being converted to warships. The merchant marine is offering their entire fleet for military service. I've never seen anything like this. Patricia understood the reaction. Humans could accept military casualties in wartime. They could understand political conflicts and territorial disputes. But the deliberate targeting of medical workers was something different. It violated the most basic rules of civilized behavior. It was an attack on everything humanity believed in. Fleet Admiral Kevin Stone's face appeared on the communication screen. He was already wearing his battle uniform and looked ready for war. Patricia, I've seen the footage. My entire fleet is mobilizing. Every ship, every crew, every weapon we have. But I need to know the mission parameters. Are we just hitting their military? Or is this something bigger? Patricia thought about Captain Morrison trying to save Zephyrian lives. She thought about Dr. Carter working 18 hours a day to cure a disease. She thought about 200 good people who died because they refused to help create weapons of mass destruction. Kevin, the mission is simple. The Krillian Empire attacked a medical ship. They murdered unarmed humanitarian workers. They celebrated the killing of people whose only crime was showing mercy. There will be consequences. What kind of consequences? Complete consequences. Total consequences. The kind of consequences that make sure this never happens again to anyone, anywhere in the galaxy. Kevin's expression became very serious. I understand, Admiral. Full military response, no restrictions. No restrictions, Patricia confirmed. Over the next 24 hours, the largest military mobilization in human history began. The regular Earth Defense Fleet was joined by converted merchant ships, mining vessels, exploration craft, and even luxury liners that had been fitted with weapons. Colony militias arrived with their own small fleets. Corporate security forces brought their patrol boats and cargo escorts. Dr. Harper's weapons development teams worked around the clock to install new technologies on the assembled ships. Gravitational weapons that could tear enemy vessels apart. At the molecular level, quantum phase generators that made ships invisible to enemy sensors. AI-assisted targeting systems that could coordinate attacks across thousands of ships simultaneously. But the most important addition was not a weapon. It was a communication device that would broadcast everything to the entire galaxy. Every species, every government, every colony would see exactly what happened when someone attacked Earth's medical ships. Patricia stood in the main command center watching the fleet assemble through the viewing ports. 3,000 ships of various sizes and types, all preparing for war. The largest military force humanity had ever put together, and it existed for one purpose: to respond to the murder of doctors and nurses. General Kane walked up to her. Admiral, we're getting reports from Krillian space. They're mobilizing their own fleets. Intelligence estimates they have 8,000 military vessels. They think they can overwhelm us with superior numbers. Patricia smiled, but there was no warmth in it. They still don't understand what they've done. They think this is a normal military conflict. They think they can win by having more ships. What should I tell our fleet commanders? Patricia looked out at the assembled ships one more time. Somewhere out there, the Krillians were preparing for what they thought would be an easy victory over primitive humans. They had no idea what was coming for them. Tell them the Krillians attacked a rescue ship. Tell them 200 good people died for the crime of saving lives. Tell them that Earth's response will be total and absolute. Tell them that when we're finished, the galaxy will understand that our medical ships are sacred, and anyone who touches them will cease to exist. The message went out to every ship in the fleet. Within hours, they would begin the journey to Krillian space. And when they arrived, the galaxy would learn that humanity's capacity for compassion was matched only by their capacity for total war. Fleet Admiral Kevin Stone stood on the bridge of his flagship, the battleship Retribution, watching as 3,000 human ships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Krillian territory. The sight was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Never in human history had so many ships gathered for a single purpose. They had come to deliver justice for the murder of 200 medical workers. The Krillian Empire had been expecting them. Intelligence reports showed that War Commander Thexlar had assembled the largest fleet in Krillian history to meet the human threat. 8,000 warships waited in formation around their primary military base. They were confident that superior numbers would give them an easy victory. Commander Alex Turner's voice came through the communication system from his stealth destroyer squadron. "Admiral, my ships are in position. The enemy has no idea we're here. The quantum phase generators are working perfectly. We're completely invisible to their sensors." Kevin smiled grimly. The Krillians were about to learn that this would not be a conventional battle. Dr. Harper's experimental technologies had been installed on every human ship. The enemy expected to fight against primitive human vessels using standard tactics. Instead, they would face weapons and strategies beyond their understanding. Captain Maria Gonzalez, status report on the gravitational weapon systems. Maria's voice responded from her heavy cruiser. "All systems operational, Admiral. We've tested the molecular disruptors. They can tear apart Krillian hull materials at the atomic level. One shot will completely destroy any ship in their fleet." Dr. Nathan Price was coordinating the AI battle systems from his command ship. His quantum computers could analyze enemy movements and coordinate attacks across thousands of ships simultaneously. Every human vessel would fight as part of a single, perfectly coordinated force. "AI systems are online, Admiral. We have complete tactical analysis of the enemy formation. Their weakness points are identified. Attack patterns are optimized. We're ready to begin." Kevin looked at the main tactical display. The Krillian fleet was arranged in a traditional battle formation that had been used for centuries. It was designed to maximize firepower and protect their command ships. Against a normal enemy, it would be very effective. Against the humans, it was a death trap. "All ships, this is Admiral Stone. Today we fight for Captain Jake Morrison and Dr. Lisa Carter. We fight for Ben Rodriguez and Amy Johnson. We fight for 200 good people who died because they refused to help create weapons of mass destruction. The Krillians wanted to see what happens when you attack Earth's medical ships. Today, they learn." The communication channel was filled with responses from ship captains across the fleet. They were ready for battle. They were ready to deliver justice. War Commander Thexlar's face appeared on the main screen. He looked confident and arrogant. Behind him, Kevin could see the bridge of the massive Krillian flagship. It was filled with weapon displays and battle computers. "Human Admiral, I am War Commander Thexlar. You have brought 3,000 ships to face 8,000. Your mathematics are poor. Surrender now, and we will make your deaths quick." Kevin stared at the alien commander who had ordered the destruction of the sanctuary. This creature had personally given the command to murder unarmed doctors and nurses. He had celebrated their deaths and bragged about the killing to his superiors. "War Commander, I am Fleet Admiral Kevin Stone. You attacked a medical ship. You murdered humanitarian workers. You celebrated the killing of people whose only crime was showing mercy to the sick and dying. Today you face the consequences of that decision." Thexlar laughed. "Humans are weak and sentimental. You care too much about individual lives. This makes you vulnerable. Today I will destroy your entire fleet and send the wreckage back to Earth as a warning." "Begin the attack," Kevin ordered. The battle started instantly, but not the way the Krillians expected. Alex Turner's invisible destroyers appeared from nowhere inside the enemy formation. Their quantum phase generators had allowed them to position themselves perfectly before decloak. They opened fire with gravitational weapons that tore 12 Krillian heavy cruisers apart in the first 10 seconds. The Krillian fleet tried to respond, but their targeting systems could not lock onto the human ships. Dr. Harper's stealth technology made the attackers appear and disappear like ghosts. Enemy weapons fired at empty space while human ships materialized behind them to deliver devastating attacks. Maria Gonzalez led her squadron of heavy cruisers in a coordinated assault on the Krillian left flank. Her gravitational weapons reached across space to grab enemy ships and crush them like tin cans. The molecular disruptors broke down the chemical bonds in Krillian hull armor, causing their vessels to simply fall apart. Enemy casualties mounting rapidly, reported the tactical officer. 40 Krillian ships destroyed in the first minute. 0 human losses. Dr. Price's AI systems were working perfectly. Every human ship knew exactly where to be and when to fire. The attack was coordinated with mathematical precision. While the Krillians fired randomly at targets they could barely see, the human fleet fought like a single organism with 3,000 sets of weapons. Commander Sarah Williams led a squadron of converted merchant ships against the Krillian supply vessels. Her ships had been cargo haulers and passenger liners just weeks ago, but now they carried enough firepower to destroy military cruisers. The Krillian supply fleet was eliminated in minutes. War Commander Thexelar was screaming orders on his bridge, but his fleet was falling apart around him. The humans were using technologies and tactics that made no sense. Ships appeared from nowhere, fired weapons that defied physics, and disappeared before return fire could be aimed. "How are they doing this?" he shouted at his science officer. "Unknown. War Commander, their stealth systems are beyond our understanding. Their weapons appear to manipulate gravity and molecular structure. This is not possible with known technology." Captain Julia Adams commanded a group of engineering vessels that had been converted for combat. Her ship surrounded a cluster of Krillian battleships and deployed a new weapon that Dr. Harper had developed specially for this mission. The temporal disruptor created small pockets of accelerated time around enemy vessels. From the outside, it looked like the Krillian ships were moving in slow motion while being torn apart by normal speed weapons. "Admiral, this is Captain Adams. The temporal weapons are working perfectly. Enemy ships are helpless inside the time distortion fields. Recommend expanding deployment." "Approved. All engineering squadrons, deploy temporal disruptors." Within minutes, half the remaining Krillian fleet was trapped in slow-motion death as human weapons tore them apart at normal speed. The enemy could not return fire effectively because their weapons and targeting systems were moving too slowly to track human ships. The battle had been going for 20 minutes, but it was already over. The Krillian fleet of 8,000 ships had been reduced to fewer than 1,000. Human losses were 0. Not a single Earth vessel had been destroyed or even seriously damaged. War Commander Thexelar tried to order a retreat, but Commander Tony Garcia's siege fleet had surrounded the survivors. The heavy battleships were equipped with gravity wells that prevented enemy ships from entering hyperspace. The Krillians were trapped in normal space with nowhere to run. "War Commander, this is Admiral Stone. I am prepared to accept your surrender." Thexelar's image on the screen showed a broken alien. His confident arrogance was gone, replaced by fear and confusion. His flagship was surrounded by human vessels that could destroy it at any moment. "This is impossible. Humans are primitives. Your technology is inferior. How are you doing this?" Kevin's voice was cold and emotionless. "We are a peaceful people, War Commander. We prefer to build hospitals rather than warships. We send doctors to help the sick rather than soldiers to conquer planets. But when someone attacks our healers, when someone murders our medical workers, we become something different. What do you want?" "I want you alive, War Commander. I want you to see what happens next. Your fleet is destroyed, but this is only the beginning. You attacked a rescue ship. Now you will witness Earth's complete response." Colonel Sam Mitchell's boarding parties were already moving toward the surviving Krillian ships. The Marines had been given special orders. Capture the enemy commanders alive. Make sure they survive to see the total destruction of their civilization. The remaining Krillian ships surrendered without further fighting. Their crews were taken. Prisoner and their commanders were brought aboard human vessels as witnesses. War Commander Thexelar was placed in a secure cell aboard the Retribution, where he could watch everything that happened next. Kevin looked at the tactical display showing the wreckage of the Krillian fleet. In 30 minutes they had destroyed 8,000 enemy ships while losing none of their own. But this had been just the warm-up. The real work was about to begin. All ship commanders, Phase 1 is complete. Begin Phase 2. Target every Krillian military installation, government facility, and industrial complex. Show them what happens when you attack Earth's doctors. The human fleet spread out across Krillian space like an unstoppable wave of destruction. And in his cell, War Commander Thexelar began to understand that destroying the sanctuary had been the worst mistake in his species' history. 6 months had passed since the destruction of the Krillian battle fleet. War Commander Thexelar sat in his prison cell aboard the human flagship, watching through a small window as the systematic destruction of his civilization continued. Every day brought new reports of Krillian military bases turned to rubble, government buildings reduced to ash, and industrial centers converted to scrap metal. General Lisa Thompson stood outside his cell holding a data tablet. She was the human officer, in charge of ground operations against Krillian planets. Her forces had captured every major Krillian world without losing a single soldier. The advanced human technology made resistance impossible. "Today we finished with your homeworld's orbital defense platforms," she told Thexelar. 150 stations that took your people centuries to build, gone in 4 hours. Thexelar did not respond. He had stopped talking to his captors weeks ago. There was nothing left to say. His empire was dying, and he was being forced to watch every moment of its destruction. Admiral Craig Wilson's fleet had spent the last month eliminating every Krillian space station, satellite, and orbital facility. The humans did not simply destroy these installations. They took them apart piece by piece, analyzing every component and studying every technology. Nothing was wasted. Everything was cataloged and understood. Captain Julia Adams led the engineering teams that dismantled Krillian industrial facilities. Her crews worked with mechanical precision, taking apart factories and shipyards like children taking apart toys. The valuable materials were shipped to human colonies. The rest was left as debris floating in space. But the humans were not simply destroying military targets. Agent Sarah Williams and her intelligence teams had spent months infiltrating Krillian society, identifying every individual who had participated in or supported the attack on the sanctuary. The lists were long and detailed. No one who had celebrated the murder of human medical workers would escape justice. Dr. Elizabeth Harper had developed new weapons specifically for this campaign. Psychological warfare systems that broadcast the footage of the sanctuary's destruction to every Krillian communication device. The message was simple and clear. This is what you celebrated. This is why your civilization is ending. The Krillian government had tried to surrender after the first week, but the humans had refused to accept it. There would be no negotiation, no peace treaty, no political settlement. The attack on a medical ship had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Commander Tony Garcia's siege fleet surrounded every inhabited Krillian world. His gravity well generators prevented any ship from leaving the planets. His orbital bombardment platforms could destroy any target on the surface with pinpoint accuracy. No Krillian leader could escape. No military officer could run away. No government official could hide. The hunting of individual war criminals had been methodical and complete. Every Krillian who had been present when the sanctuary was destroyed was tracked down and captured. Every officer who had cheered the killing was brought to trial. Every politician who had supported the attack faced human justice. General Robert Kane led the tribunals that tried Krillian war criminals. The trials were broadcast throughout the galaxy so every species could see the evidence. The footage of the sanctuary's destruction was played over and over. The celebrations of Krillian officers were shown in detail. The universe watched as justice was delivered with mathematical precision. The defendant is charged with participation in the unprovoked attack on a medical vessel, Kane read from his tablet. The defendant is charged with murder of unarmed humanitarian workers. The defendant is charged with violation of galactic medical protection laws. How do you plead? The Krillian officer standing before him said nothing. They never said anything anymore. They knew what the verdict would be. The defendant is found guilty on all charges. The sentence is death by firing squad. Next case. The executions were carried out by human Marines who volunteered for the duty. Each firing squad was composed of soldiers who had served on medical ships or had worked with humanitarian missions. They understood exactly what crime they were punishing. But the complete destruction of Krillian civilization went beyond military targets and war criminals. The humans systematically dismantled every aspect of Krillian society, that had supported the attack on medical workers. Government systems were erased. Military traditions were forgotten. Cultural institutions that celebrated warfare were eliminated. Dr. Aim. Nathan Price's psychological teams worked with surviving Krillian civilians to reprogram their entire society. The new generation would learn different values. They would understand that attacking medical workers was the worst possible crime. They would know that helping the sick and injured was more important than military conquest. Captain Maria Gonzalez supervised the relocation of surviving Krillian populations to reservation worlds under permanent human supervision. These planets were comfortable, but isolated. The Krillians would have everything they needed to live peaceful lives, but they would never again have the ability to build warships or threaten their neighbors. The transformation was complete and irreversible. The Krillian Empire that had existed for thousands of years was gone. In its place were scattered groups of survivors who lived under human protection and human law. They would rebuild their society according to human values, or they would not rebuild at all. Thexelar watched through his prison window as the last Krillian government building on the homeworld was systematically dismantled. The ancient palace that had housed Krillian emperors for 50 generations was being taken apart, stone by stone. Human workers cataloged each piece before loading it onto transport ships. General Thompson stood beside his cell again. That was the last one. Every government building, every military academy, every monument to Krillian military glory. All gone. Your civilization is officially extinct. She paused and looked at the broken alien commander. Do you understand now what you did? You didn't just attack a human ship. You attacked the idea that medical workers should be protected. You murdered people whose only crime was saving lives. You celebrated the killing of doctors and nurses. Thexelar finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. We thought humans were weak. We thought your compassion made you vulnerable. Thompson nodded. Our compassion does make us vulnerable in some ways, but it also makes us incredibly dangerous to anyone who threatens it. You attacked our healers. You killed our lifesavers. You forced us to show the galaxy what happens when someone crosses that line. The final phase of the operation began 1 week later. Human engineers placed massive transmitters throughout former Krillian space. These devices would broadcast a continuous message to every ship that entered the region. The message was simple but absolute. This space was once controlled by the Krillian Empire. The Krillians attacked an Earth medical ship and murdered 200 humanitarian workers. In response, Earth eliminated their civilization completely. No Krillian military force survived. No Krillian government remained. No Krillian leader lived. This sector is now designated as the Carter Memorial Zone in honor of Dr. Lisa Carter and the crew of the medical ship Sanctuary. The message continued, with details about the new humanitarian laws that would govern this region of space. Any species could settle here, but only if they agreed to protect medical workers and rescue ships. Any government could establish colonies, but only if they signed treaties guaranteeing the safety of humanitarian missions. Admiral Kevin Stone stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the last human ships prepare to leave former Krillian space. The operation was complete. An entire civilization had been eliminated in response to the murder of medical workers. The message had been sent to every species in the galaxy. Admiral, we're receiving communications from governments throughout known space, reported the communications officer. They're all asking about our new humanitarian protection laws. They want to sign treaties guaranteeing the safety of medical ships. Kevin smiled for the first time in months. Send them the standard agreement. Any species that signs will receive our protection. Any species that threatens medical workers will receive the Krillian treatment. The human fleet began its journey back to Earth. Behind them, they left a transformed region of space where the safety of medical workers was guaranteed by the complete destruction of those who had violated that principle. In his prison cell, Thexelar continued to stare out the window at the empty space where his civilization used to exist. He would spend the rest of his life as a living reminder of what happened when someone attacked Earth's healers. The galaxy would remember his story and understand that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their military might, but their absolute unwavering protection of those who chose to heal rather than harm. 5 years had passed since the last Krillian government building was dismantled. Captain Daniel Foster stood on the bridge of the medical ship Healing Light as it approached the planet New Haven, in what was once Krillian space. The ship carried the same type of crew that the Sanctuary had carried: doctors, nurses, engineers, and scientists dedicated to helping people in need. The planet below had been a Krillian military world 5 years ago. Now it was home to refugees from 12 different species who had fled wars and disasters throughout the galaxy. They had come here because they knew they would be safe. They knew that anyone who attacked a medical ship in this region would face the same fate as the Krillians. Dr. Jennifer Parker walked onto the bridge carrying her medical scanner. She was the chief medical officer and had been studying reports of a disease outbreak in the refugee camps. Jennifer was young, only 28 years old, but she was already an experienced doctor who had served on humanitarian missions across human space. "Captain, the situation down there is serious but manageable," she reported. "It's a respiratory infection that's spreading through the camps. Nothing we can't handle with standard treatments, but they need help fast." Daniel nodded. This was exactly the kind of mission the Healing Light was designed for. They would land, treat the sick, and leave the refugees with enough medicine and knowledge to prevent future outbreaks. It was simple, important work that saved lives. Engineer Brian Kelly looked up from his console. "Captain, I'm reading their power grid. It's in bad shape. Looks like they're running on emergency generators. They need infrastructure repair along with medical help. How long to fix it? Give me 3 days and a good team. I can have them running at full power with backup systems in place." Communications Officer Lisa Garcia was monitoring local radio transmissions. "Captain, they're excited that we're here. They're calling us the Sky Healers and preparing a welcome ceremony. They want to thank us before we even land." Daniel smiled. This was very different from the reception the Sanctuary had received at Kepler 442. These refugees knew about Earth's medical ships and what they represented. They understood that humans came to help, not to interfere in local politics or take advantage of weakness. The Healing Light landed at the main refugee camp without any problems. The local leaders, representing all 12 species in the settlement, were waiting to greet them. They offered gifts and formal speeches of gratitude, but Daniel politely explained that the crew needed to get to work immediately. Dr. Parker set up medical stations throughout the camp while her team began treating patients. The disease was spreading quickly, but it responded well to human medicines. Within hours, people who had been struggling to breathe were sitting up and talking to their families. Brian Kelly and his engineers went to work on the power systems. The refugees had done their best with limited resources, but they lacked the advanced tools and knowledge needed for proper repairs. The human team rebuilt entire sections of the power grid and installed backup generators that would keep the lights on during emergencies. The work continued for 4 days. By the time it was finished, the disease outbreak was completely eliminated, and the refugee camp had better infrastructure than most established colonies. The Healing Light prepared to depart, leaving behind medical supplies and technical manuals that would help the refugees maintain their new systems. As the ship lifted off, Daniel received a communication from Admiral Patricia Walsh at Earth Defense Command. Her face appeared on the main screen, and she looked pleased about something. "Captain Foster, I wanted to personally congratulate you and your crew on another successful mission, but I also have some news that I think you'll find interesting." "What kind of news, Admiral?" Patricia held up a data tablet. "We just received formal applications from 47 different species asking to join the Medical Protection Treaty. They want Earth's guarantee that their medical ships will be protected, and they're willing to provide the same protection to our ships in return." Daniel felt a surge of pride. The Medical Protection Treaty had been established after the destruction of the Krillian Empire. Any species that signed it agreed to treat medical ships as sacred and inviolate. In return, Earth promised to defend their medical workers with the same absolute commitment that had destroyed the Krillians. 47 species, that's almost half the known galaxy. And more applications are coming in every week. The Zephyrians were the first to sign, of course. They remember what the Sanctuary did for them, but now even former enemies are asking to join. The Altarians, the Vegan Confederacy, Even the isolationist Tausatians want our protection for their medical ships. The treaty was having effects beyond just protecting medical workers. Species that had been enemies for centuries were finding common ground in their commitment to humanitarian principles. Old wars were ending as governments realized that attacking medical ships would bring Earth's wrath down on them. Dr. Parker joined the conversation from the medical bay. "Admiral, we're seeing the effects down here too. The refugees on New Haven come from species that used to fight each other constantly. But they're working together now. They understand that humanitarian cooperation is more important than old grudges." Patricia nodded. "That's exactly what we hoped would happen. The destruction of the Krillian Empire wasn't just about revenge. It was about establishing new rules for galactic civilization, rules that put the protection of innocent life above military conquest and political power." Communications Officer Garcia looked up from her station. "Admiral, I'm monitoring news broadcasts from across the galaxy. There's something interesting happening. Medical schools are reporting record enrollment. More people want to become doctors and nurses. Humanitarian organizations are getting more volunteers and funding than they've ever had before." The news didn't surprise Daniel. The story of the sanctuary had spread throughout known space. Every species had heard about the human medical ship that died trying to save Zephyrian lives, and the terrible price that the Krillians paid for destroying it. Young people across the galaxy were inspired to dedicate their lives to healing rather than warfare. Admiral Walsh continued her briefing. "We're also seeing changes in military doctrine throughout the galaxy. Most species are reducing their offensive capabilities and focusing on defensive systems. Nobody wants to be seen as aggressive when Earth is watching for threats to medical workers." The conversation was interrupted by an emergency signal from the planet below. Dr. Parker immediately began scanning the communication frequencies while Brian Kelly checked the settlement's power systems through their monitoring network. "Captain, there's been an accident at the mining operation on the other side of the planet," Dr. Parker reported. "Cave-in with multiple casualties. They're asking for immediate medical assistance." Daniel didn't hesitate. "Set course for the mining site. All medical teams prepare for emergency surgery. Brian, bring your rescue equipment." The healing light changed course and headed toward the mining accident at maximum speed. This was what they were for. This was why Earth maintained a fleet of medical ships that could respond to emergencies anywhere in human space or Allied territory. As they approached the accident site, Daniel thought about Captain Jake Morrison and Dr. Lisa Carter. Their deaths had changed the galaxy in ways they never could have imagined. The attack on their medical ship had led to the destruction of an empire, but it had also created a new era where medical workers were protected by the most powerful military force in known space. The mining accident turned out to be serious but manageable. 12 workers were trapped underground, but Brian Kelly's engineering team was able to reach them safely. Dr. Parker's medical team treated their injuries and had them stable within hours. Another successful rescue mission for Earth's medical fleet. Later that night, as the healing light traveled toward their next assignment, Daniel stood in the observation deck looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, other medical ships were saving lives and helping people in need. They could do their work safely because the galaxy now understood what happened to anyone who threatened Earth's healers. The universe had learned that humanity's capacity for compassion was matched only by their capacity for total war. But more importantly, it had learned that protecting those who heal was worth any price, even the complete destruction of those who would harm them.